Much of Sydney's history is bound up in this area they call the Rocks. Here some historians say the first fleet landed. Here are old buildings and narrow ways which have remained almost untouched by the tide of change which has swept through Sydney. But time is running out for the Rocks. This triangle of land crowding the western shore of Sydney Cove is soon to see great change. The little houses huddled against the rocky cliffs which give the area its name will soon go. The steep slopes of the narrow ridge have determined the architecture of its houses. The area to be redeveloped covers about 19 acres between Sydney Cove and the Harbour Bridge. The whole area will be levelled and rebuilt as a complex of modern offices and residential buildings. A motorist driving south off the Harbour Bridge in another 10 or 15 years will see the redeveloped Rocks area something like this. This small part of Sydney is one of Australia's oldest settled areas and dates back to the colonial days. Prints in the Mitchell Library in Sydney show it as it was in 1810. By 1842, buildings dotted the Rocks, and by 1900, it was notorious. Narrow alleys ran between squalid houses. It was a haunt of thieves. The alleys are still there today. Somehow they typify the mixed and colourful history of the Rocks. It grew haphazardly. The old waterfront taverns are remembered in the picturesque names of its hotels even now. This is one of the oldest in Australia. Argyle Cut links the two halves of the Rocks. Hacked from the solid rock a century ago, this man-made chasm was one of the most spectacular engineering feats of early Sydney. Nearby is the Argyle Bond, a grim stone building whose interior courtyard played a part in the colony's history. Beneath it are the caverns where rum, the general currency of the young colony, was stored. Rum is still stored there today, but it's under bond for excise. Parked cars line the streets of the Rocks these days. The parking problem is serious for the motorist and for the people who live in the small houses whose doorways are so easily blocked. In the new Rocks, there will be an answer to the parking problem. Under the giant office blocks and plazas of the area, there will be underground parking stations for 3,000 cars. One of the oldest parts of Sydney is Argyle Place. Here is the Garrison Church, built in 1840 for the redcoats of the Dawes Point Battery. In Argyle Place, you step back 100 years. Old photographs show it in the 1870s, much the same as it is today. Nothing has been done to spoil or change the character of this part of the Rocks. The houses ringing Argyle Place were once the homes of merchants, sea captains and lawyers. They have a simple grace, recalling the elegance of the London of Dickens. The redevelopment of the eastern part of the Rocks will sweep away these old warehouses on the quayside. Today they house offices and stores. Their function has changed. Once they fronted onto the wharves of West Circular Quay. The warehouses go back to the days of one of Australia's first business tycoons, the Scottish merchant Robert Campbell. He built the warehouses and wharves. His ships sailed from here to begin Australia's overseas trade. Soon the warehouses will be replaced by modern apartment buildings. 13 tower blocks accommodating more than 3,500 people. No doubt the old hospital catered for victims of frequent waterfront brawls. Today it's a police station. It's said that someone once climbed the front of the building and placed a baton in the jaws of an ornamental lion's head. Nobody's ever been able to extract it, but it will be moved when they build a pyramid-shaped hotel here. The only building left intact will be the Maritime Services Board headquarters, but it will have new neighbours, 4 giant towers of office buildings up to 38 floors high. These buildings will swallow up Cambridge Street. Here the houses are perched on rocky ledges which they have occupied for well over a century. The diminutive houses in Harrington Street will go. They're getting on in years, like many of their occupants. A wide, traffic-free plaza will replace them. In Lower Fort Street are many fine homes. Some, like Bly House, have taken on a new lease of life. Like all the Rocks areas west of the bridge, they are outside the area to be redeveloped. This is Argyle Street today, looking towards the cut, but it will look like this eventually. The company which will redevelop the Rocks expects to begin the job late next year. The first office block will be finished in mid-1966. The work will take at least 10 years and cost £30 million. So the eastern part of the Rocks will disappear. On the surface, the area west of the bridge will remain unchanged, but it will have lost part of its identity. Soon, this old part of Sydney will find itself living shoulder to shoulder with the newest part of Sydney. The Rocks has its own way of life. It has resisted change. Perhaps it will continue to do so. Perhaps time is running out here too.